Hello everyone, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and money-colored commentator. On today's show, developing a financial profile, part 5 in our series on basic education for financial literacy, sponsored by LifeSize Solutions and the Society for Financial Awareness. Well, welcome to our 5th segment, and we're talking now about building a financial profile for yourself. And one of the things I want to do is walk you through some sample questions. If you say, Steve, I see what you're doing here, and you say, I'd like to have a financial profile on my risk tolerance or my life expectancy, if you'll write me at steve@lifesizesolutions.com, I'll be happy to send it to you absolutely free, no obligation. I just want you to have the material and the information that you need to make good decisions with your advisor. Now, here's how soon will you begin to take distribution? Well, if you look at a plot, and I have this too if you want life events, I have a whole life events from the time that you're a child all the way to the time that you die. I have clocked out every single on the timeline on an analog line going all the way out to age 100. I've looked at every life event that you possibly could have in our culture. And what I've done is I've said, when am I going to need this money? So if I'm looking at buying a down payment on a house, I'm going to have a pretty good idea within a 2-year period, maybe a 5-year period, when I'm going to need that money. I'm going to start having children. I might need to know when that's going to occur. I might want to put money aside. I'm going to have college education for those children. I need to know when that's going to occur and when I need that money. I'm going to retire someday. I need to know when I'm going to retire and what I'm going to need to do that. So when I'm looking at time horizon, I'm looking, is it less than 2 years? It better be serious liquid money. 2 to 5 years, short-term CDs and annuities. They got good rates if you're not in the market. Number 3, 6 to 9 years. Now I'm looking at the market. I'm going to look at some things in the market that I think could play. 10 to 15 years, I could be talking about child's education, my own retirement, or more than 15 years, probably retirement, and I'm probably planning for either legacy issues for my children and grandchildren and legacy issues for the charity that I like. 2. Here's how would you best describe your expected future earnings over the next 5 years? I expect my earnings to outpace inflation. So if I'm working, does my money actually make more than I need? And does that money outpace the inflation? I have grown, especially people who are working right now. Is it paying the bills? Is my actual earnings paying my cost for my groceries, my gasoline, my utilities, my home payments, my home repairs, my car repairs? All these things I want to know, all the basic commodities of life. I need to know, do I expect my earnings to outpace my inflation? Because those are spending issues. It's the power of your purchasing dollar. I expect my earnings to keep pace with inflation. Well, do you? They should be even. Or I expect my earnings to decrease. These are all 3 things that are important while you're accumulating, and they're really important in retirement. Do I think the income coming in, and hopefully I'm getting an annual bump with my Social Security, I'm getting an annual bump with my cost of living adjustment with my annuities, I'm getting a little bit of bump because I'm getting dividend and earnings off my stock portfolio or my mutual fund and or ETF. I'm trying to get that kind of number, and so I'll see which one of these do I think is reasonable, and especially in retirement, without planning, I'm never going to know the answer to this. I need to know the real numbers, and the only way to do that is get a budget. Now, how long will your non-retirement savings last in the event of a financial emergency? We always tell people be 3 to 6 months out with cash equivalents that you can get to. Remember, things happen in life. I still have to pay a deductible to my car repair if I get in an accident, a deductible to my house, a deductible to my long-term care. I might have a deductible right to my Medicare. All these things really matter, and I need to know what those numbers are and park money aside, maybe from 3 months at minimum. I would say 3 months at minimum. 4 to 6 months, more. It's probably more in the game for most people. And remember, 6 to 12 months would be more ideal. You could lose your job. You could be out of work for a year. During the 2008 crisis, there was some people that didn't find jobs for 2 to 3 years. They had to have the cash equivalents to help them escort them through those troubled times. And remember, ideally, man, if you had more than a year, you're sitting a lot better. Remember, in America, over 40% of Americans don't even have $1,000 in liquid emergency money in accounts like this. Pretty tragic. Now, how about your monthly income? Do you use it to pay installment debt? I need to know what your debt is. Now, think about it. Charge card debt, leasing, paying for a car, right? That's debt. I need to know my mortgage debt. I need to know my college education debt. I need to have an idea what my indebtedness is. My short-term, my medium, and long-term indebtedness. Hopefully you'll say this: I have no installment debt. I don't. I believe in retiring all your debt, especially your mortgage, by the time you get into retirement. Remember, the baby boomers are the first generation of all time, since we've been tracking this, that have been carrying a mortgage into their retirement. Part of that has been because they've been helping their parents out with their long-term care costs and their children with their college tuition. But nevertheless, we need to get out of debt before we hit retirement. The second thing is less than 25% of monthly income. Well, they said, well, that's good, but it's still 25% of your income. That could have been going for cash accumulation or retirement funding. So 25 to 50% of my monthly income, if my mortgage and all my credit cards and my lease and my car obligations, car payment obligations, that's a lot of money. When you start seeing half of everything that's going out is all on debt service, you're now looking like the United States government. Because remember, our GDP to debt, and I mean debt and obligations, retirement pension obligations for military, federal, and state workers, is way past 20 trillion. That's just the debt. We're in the 80 trillion mark, and I don't know how we're going to pay for this. You don't want to have the same balance sheet the United States government has. Sample. Are you willing to take on more risk for your investment performance to exceed inflation? Some people say, I would need to get inflation. I need to have a little bit of more power, purchasing power. But remember, you're taking on more risk. Are you okay with that? Have you done a risk tolerance test? Have you sat down with your advisor to walk through your psychological profile, your own Psychonomics? How can you handle this? Can you handle it? So I'm always going to ask questions for inflation. I think yes. I don't have, most of my portfolio is not that way, but I have some to take the edge off of my loss of purchasing power because of inflation. And remember, whatever the inflation rate the government says, whatever the CPI they're talking about, is not what I pay. I pay gasoline, I pay groceries, I pay utilities. Everything I'm in there, those aren't even in the inflation rate. So I find it to be very misleading. They say the inflation rate is really down 2-3% when the purchasing power of my dollar is getting eroded by things that they don't count inside the CPI. Here's one. How long would your non-retirement savings last in the event of a financial emergency? How would you respond to the following statement? Protecting my portfolio loss is more important than achieving high returns. Do you agree with that? Listen to the question. How would you respond to the following statement? Protecting my portfolio from loss is more important than achieving high rate of return. Strongly agree? Agree? Risk and return are equally important? Disagree or strongly agree? You have to understand, does that matter to you? And what if you agree, you're going to have to start saying, if I have strong opinions on this, or I have strong disagreements on this, you need to start thinking, I need to kind of change my portfolio. Do you realize that many people that I've seen over the years will take a risk tolerance test, and I'll see what they're into in their 401k. And their 401k portfolio does not match what they've done on their risk tolerance. They're generally more conservative than they are in their actual 401k portfolio. So when we have a correction or a bear market, they're really completely taken by surprise and don't know how to approach it. But their risk tolerance told me what they could take care of. I need to match my risk tolerance test with my 401k portfolio. I need to get those agreeing. I've noticed, by the way, in propensity over the last 35 years in this business, that women are much closer to their risk tolerance test and their investments than men are with their risk tolerance test and investments. From an original investment of $40,000, your portfolio now is worth $80,000, suddenly drops by 20% or $16,000 loss. How do you react if that occurs? Remember, earlier in some of the segments, we need to start taking some of that profit off before this happens. But now it's already occurred. Do you sell the investment entirely? Is that your reaction? People did that in 1987. They did it in 2008. Both those two debacles. I'm sorry, let's add 2001 in there as well. Make no adjustment, let it ride. Make additional purchases to the current portfolio. Try to avoid the investment that may drop 20%. Try. Well, try it as best as you can, but that's very difficult to do. How would you react? What's your psychonomics? What's the psychological profile of your habit and how you would react to this if you had up to $80,000 after investing $40,000 and then it dropped 16 grand? How do you react to it? You try to understand how you think and how you move towards these questions. These are good questions to know. Your portfolio from previous question, now the previous question is now $64,000. Suddenly it drops another 15% or $9,000. Do you sell the investment entirely? Do you make no adjustments? Do you make additional purchases to the current portfolio? Do you try to avoid the investment that dropped 20%? Now we've had 2 negative investment numbers in a row. How are you going to react to it? How are you going to position your feelings and your emotions to be a disciplined investor during these times when it's negative? Listen, when it's positive, it's going up, I don't have to worry about it. I don't get phone calls for that. I get phone calls for this. And then, how would you best describe the depth and length of your investment experience? Have you been in the market 5 years? Are you a long-term 401k player? Do you have people that are really have you been educated by your advisor? You need to understand that you need to come to a place to say, I have no experience. Don't sit there at the water cooler and say you know what you're doing when you don't. I have some experience. I have broad experience. Whether you have broad experience or no experience, you need a financial advisor with you to go all the way. This is not a do-it-yourself for 95% of the market. You really need help with a financial advisor, a person that is professional and understands this market and can help you invest and keep your hand on the tiller so that you can get to retirement and hit the goals that you're trying to get to. Thank you for watching our series on basic education for financial literacy, sponsored by LifeSize Solutions and the Society for Financial Awareness. And keep in mind, before moving forward with any of the ideas on the show, always check with your tax consultant, legal counsel, or financial advisor. You've been watching Steve Savant's Money, the name of the game.